Excellent. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Harris. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Pennsylvania Petroleum Association. On behalf of the PPA, I'd like to welcome you to our monthly webinar series, which takes place the first Tuesday of every month. Before we get started here today, I would like to encourage you all to ask questions via the question feature in GoToWebinar. You will be on mute as an attendee throughout the webinar, but you can type your questions in, and what we'll do at the end of the presentation, I will moderate all the questions to Colton. For some reason, if we don't get to your question, or we run out of time or whatever it may be, I'll make sure I connect you with Colton after the fact, and to make sure that you get an answer or clarification. I encourage you all to take advantage of this feature and ask questions throughout. At this point, I want to introduce our presenter today, who is Colton Brown. Colton is an energy program specialist with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. And Colton will be presenting today Pennsylvania electric vehicle incentive programs. Colton, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you. Good morning. And as Ted mentioned there, we're going to cover a lot of different things, and it's very easy to lose track of questions that you want to ask. So please type them in as we go, and I'll get to them all at the end. But I want to make sure I get through all of the content here, and then feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like. Feel free to even go, a little off topic as you'd like, just general electric vehicle questions. Those are always welcome as well. So for our content today, I'm going to cover just a little bit of electric vehicle basics, make sure that we all have a good knowledge base to work from, so we understand some of the key terms, some trends that are going on in Pennsylvania and in the country, some goals that we in Pennsylvania have set, and what we're doing to get there. We'll go over incentives that are available to consumers as well as businesses from the federal side, and then we have 4 incentive programs run through DEP that we'll cover in a little bit more detail. So first, defining what we really mean by electric vehicle. So the 2 vehicle types here on the screen, normal gas vehicle that we're all very used to, as well as a hybrid, which has been around for a good 20 years now. Hybrid means that there is a battery pack, there is an electric motor, but the only fuel that goes into the vehicle is gasoline. So at least for the purpose of my presentation here today, hybrid is not in the electric vehicle category. It is sometimes called hybrid electric vehicle, but if it does not plug in, for the purposes of my discussion here this morning, we're not going to consider that to be an electric vehicle. The 2 vehicle types that we see here, plug-in hybrid and battery electric vehicle, are the 2 vehicle types that would be included when I say electric vehicle this morning. So plug-in hybrid means that it's just like a normal hybrid, and that it has a gas engine, it has an electric motor, it has a battery, but that battery is large enough that it can take a charge from an external source, so that you get some electric only miles before the battery would be depleted to a point that the gas engine would kick in. And obviously battery electric vehicle means that it is just an electric battery and electric motor, and there is no gas engine and no tailpipe. So there's a couple of primary benefits of electric vehicles as compared to their gasoline powered equivalent. The foremost is that they cost a lot less to own and operate. Generally, you're spending somewhere between 50 and 70% less, both for the fuel and for the maintenance. Electric, for comparison purposes, if you're filling up like a light-duty vehicle, the electric to power it costs the equivalent of about $1 per gallon for gas. And then maintenance is also much cheaper because there's a lot fewer moving parts. There's no oil changes. There's much less frequent brake maintenance or repair because the regenerative braking of the hybrid system, or the electric system, reduces the wear and tear on the braking system. So there's a lot of benefits there to the owner once you own the vehicle. And DEP is also, very interested in the benefits to air quality, and really everyone should be, because air quality impacts all of us. Just if you switch to electric and you charge it on the normal grid, right off the bat, you're reducing your emissions by about 2/3 to 3/4. And then as more and more electricity comes from renewable sources, those emissions will obviously get much less. All right, so just covering the different types of charging so that we understand these different terms. So there's AC level 1 and AC level 2. AC means that the electricity is coming in as alternating current. AC level 1 means that you're charging via a regular wall outlet. So this is oftentimes referred to as like a trickle charge or a slow charge. It does take a while to charge that way. Generally, you get about 4 miles of vehicle range per hour. Now there are many people that own either plug-in hybrids or a fully electric vehicle. If they don't drive very much, that they find this level of charging to be completely adequate, and they do not pursue getting faster charging, and it works well for them. Most charging though occurs at level 2, whether that be for an all-electric vehicle at home or whether that's in public or at work. Level 2 charging generally gets you about 20 to 25 miles of vehicle range per hour that you're charging. The exception there is if it's a plug-in hybrid, sometimes they cannot receive that fast of a charge. Sometimes they can only get 10 miles of range per hour, but with their smaller battery packs, that's still completely fine. So most level 2 charging will come in at about 7 kilowatt power. Can go higher than that, but that's the typical that we have kind of settled into now for level 2 charging. And then at the high end is the DC fast charging, which kind of assimilates what we're used to with fueling a gasoline vehicle, where it occurs pretty quickly, generally a half hour or less. The amount of time that it would take you to pull up to the rest stop, park, go in, grab a meal, and then get back out. It's really designed for interstate travel, traveling long distances, or if you don't have charging at home and you didn't, for whatever reason, the normal places that you charge, you didn't have enough time, so you need a quick fill up at some point. So DC fast charging is usually at least a 50 kilowatt output. Newer stations are going up to 150, 200, 350, very high power speeds, able to deliver many miles of charging in just a few minutes. So, yep. Okay, and then moving on to the trends of electric vehicle sales. So we know that they're increasing. We know that manufacturers are really upping their plans for selling electric vehicles, and that it's slowly becoming, the future in that sense. So early on, sales were pretty low for a while. In the last few years, we've really started to see an increase. If you're wondering about the last couple years, thinking it doesn't look like that quick of an increase, 2019, we actually lost one or two of the popular electric vehicle models, which is why we saw kind of a steady number of sales. And then 2020 there looks like a small increase, but when we factor in that overall vehicle sales were down about 15%, and that electric vehicle sales were up 25%, that means that their market share actually increased by about 40% in Pennsylvania last year. So it is a pretty solid increase, and we do expect another large increase here this year, as there's a number of additional models that are becoming available. So this trend is certainly to continue. Certainly electric vehicles still represent a pretty small share of new vehicle sales. They just exceeded 1% in Pennsylvania for the first time in 2020, but they are rising pretty quickly now. So, and along with the vehicles, the availability of charging is also increasing pretty quickly as well. So as of now, there's over 2,100 public charging plugs in Pennsylvania, 900 different locations. A few hundred of those plugs are Tesla plugs, so only those vehicles could use them, but most of them can be used by any vehicle. And that number of plugs available doubled between January of 2018 and January of 2020. So the number of plugs out there is definitely increasing quickly, and there's a lot of interest in installing new plugs. So a few things that we're doing here at the state, and then we'll get into our different incentives that are available. So if you're interested in just a really good overview of electric vehicles, of programs that are available, we have created an update to our electric vehicle roadmap called the 2021 update. And it's just a 12-page booklet, really good summary. The link is here on the slide if you're interested, or you can Google search it as well. That'll bring it right up. Essentially, in 2019, we released our electric vehicle roadmap, which had 13 recommendations on how we can be increasing electric vehicle adoption, and we're working on implementing as many of them as we can. We've also done some public outreach. So we did a webinar series last year. You can view those webinars on the website there. But there's a good one for the public. There's also one for businesses, so you can see what the incentives are specifically for that audience, and then also hear from some speakers from those industries in each of those recordings.
Hey, Colton.
Yep.
Hey, I just got a comment, and I'm seeing the same on my end, but it looks like your presentation's overly zoomed in for whatever reason, and you can't see all of it on the screen from a visual perspective.
Okay. If I take it out of slide mode, it looks like this.
Yeah, I realize that's not the ideal way to present it, but I can see the entire screen on my end this way, and I would assume the rest of the attendees can as well. Would you be all right with just proceeding through this format?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Yeah, so, and then along with that public outreach, we're also working to kind of ensure that long distance travel with electric vehicles is possible throughout the state. So we're following the Federal Highway Administration's electric vehicle corridor ready program, which basically says that you need DC fast charging at least once every 50 miles for a highway to be ready for electric vehicle travel. So you can see that we have a number of highway miles that are already at that ready category, and then a large sections that are still pending, which means that the gaps are larger than 50 miles. So we are working to kind of fill in as many of those gaps as we can with our funding programs, some of which we'll cover just a little bit later. A couple goals that we have in Pennsylvania for vehicle electrification. The first comes from our multi-state medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle memorandum of understanding signed by 15 states and Washington, DC. This basically sets an aspirational goal that 30% of new medium and heavy duty vehicle sales will be zero emission vehicles by 2030, and that 100% of those sales will be zero emission by 2050. Over time, we will develop action plans on how to go about meeting those goals. Separately, not through that MOU, actually through executive order, we have a goal to electrify 25% of our own passenger fleet by 2025. Okay, and now we start getting into the incentive portion of the presentation, where we'll focus most of the time. So first, the incentives that are available from the federal side for electric vehicles. There is the federal income tax credit for purchasing electric vehicles. That's up to $7,500 as long as it's a vehicle that's not made by GM or Tesla, since they've exceeded their cap for sales. But I do have the IRS form there if you want to look up details on it. That's available to individuals but also businesses. So any business that would look to purchase those vehicles can also take advantage of that tax credit. Secondly, we have a 30% federal tax credit for installing charging equipment. This one is much less well known, but it's still a very great opportunity to take advantage of. That is capped at $1,000 for home installations, but it's capped at $30,000 for businesses. So if you're looking to install any level 2 charging or even DC fast charging, this can really help decrease the cost of that upgrade, so that it's more affordable. I will note that it says that install by 12/31 of this year. Basically, this tax credit has been extended in 1-year increments for 5 or 6 years in a row now. Pretty much every year when we get to around December or even January of the following year, the federal government extends it. So I obviously can't guarantee that that would happen again, but that has certainly been the pattern for quite some time. All right, so now shifting into the incentives that are available from DEP, from our state. So for consumers, there's an incentive up to $750 for purchasing a new electric vehicle. This is only for individuals. It will not apply to a business. So we'll skip over that one pretty quick, since it's probably not as relevant for our discussion. So now we're going to cover 4 incentive programs from DEP that can be utilized by businesses. 3 of them are through Driving PA Forward. Driving PA Forward is Pennsylvania's branding for our share of the Volkswagen settlement diesel funds, and 1 of them is not. So the ones that are through Driving PA Forward, that means that we have a set amount of money through that settlement that we're putting towards each of these programs, and when those funds are gone, they're gone. The other one gets funded every year. So this first one here, the level 2 rebate program through Driving PA Forward, it is definitely our most popular. We have over 300 completed projects that have installed over 1,000 plugs throughout the state. We have another 100+ projects installing 500 plugs that are in progress at the moment. So any location that has parking spaces basically is eligible for this program. So that's public spaces, workplaces, whether that's for employee or for fleet charging, multi-unit dwellings, are all eligible to get a rebate through this program to install level 2 charging equipment. So, and here are the current rebate levels that are available. We step the rebate levels down periodically. So this is what they're currently at, up to $4,000 per plug if it's available to the public, and networked charging equipment. We'll define networked in a moment. And then we have multi-unit dwelling category and all other eligible projects, which is largely workplace charging. Okay, so for the level 2 rebate program, if this is something that you're thinking about installing level 2 equipment, and to put in context, level 2 equipment is a good option anytime that it's somewhere that people will normally park for at least an hour. So if it's somewhere that people would park for much shorter than that, it'd be more conducive to DC fast charging. For example, somewhere like a convenience store is somewhere that DC fast charging would make sense because people generally stop for 15-30 minutes at most. Somewhere like a grocery store could be either, because sometimes people are there for short periods of time and sometimes longer. And then many places like maybe a shopping mall or other business like that would make sense for level 2 charging, since that's generally a longer stay. Workplace employee always makes sense to be level 2 charging. Level 2 charging is much more cost effective per plug, and there's different things to think about there, but yeah. So the way our program works is that as long as your project is eligible, it meets the program, it meets the guidelines, you can get a rebate. You submit an application before you would go about starting the project, basically when you're at the time that you have your project quotes and you know what it's going to cost. That's when you would submit an application. We then award a rebate, which basically says that your funds are locked in. We have set them aside for you. You then go and install the level 2 equipment. Once it's finished being installed, then you submit for reimbursement from us following the instructions on the rebate voucher. So you just have to use a standard charging plug, minimum of 7.2 kilowatt output, at least 2 plugs on a project. That J1772 plug standard is what every vehicle other than Tesla vehicles use. And Tesla vehicles can use the J1772 plug type with an adapter. So every vehicle on the road can use a charging station that's using that plug type. There's a lot of things to think about if you start thinking about getting into making charging equipment available. So first off, where is it going to be located? That can have impacts on the customer experience, but then also the installation cost. So you may want to locate the project where it's convenient for the customer or not convenient for the customer. So that way you're only going to park there if you're going to charge, and it's not going to get taken up by regular gasoline vehicles. Where you choose to locate the plugs also kind of impacts on installation costs for different reasons. For example, this plug in the picture on the right, that's in a state forest that received funding through our level 2 rebate program for its installation. You can see that it's in a gravel parking lot. That could have really helped with the installation cost, because that means that you didn't have to tear up concrete or asphalt to trench the electrical wire. Anytime that you're tearing up, concrete, you're definitely adding to the expense, because you have to tear it out and then you have to redo it. At the same time, maybe this plug is, a couple hundred feet away from the building that's supplying its electrical power, which means that they had to run a lot of cable, which could have increased the cost. I don't think that's the case in this situation, but those are both factors. How far are you from the electric box, but then also how much tearing up or redoing concrete do you need to do? Those are big factors on your cost. Then you have the question of, do you want to network the equipment? So being networked basically means that the charging plugs are connected to cell data and continuously provide data back and forth between a network and the charging station itself. So that charging plug on the right, that is a non-networked piece of equipment. It sits there, you plug it into the vehicle and it charges, and that is about all that it does. It cannot take credit card payments. It cannot, it has no other functionality. In the middle, the picture you see is some of the data and functionality that you get from networked charging equipment. So you can see all sorts of different things about when people are charging, how much they're charging. It has the ability to take credit card payments. So you can essentially charge people a fee to be charging with that equipment. Networking is also good for the customer experience aspect, because they can see via an app if the charging equipment is available for charging at any given point in time. So if the equipment's not available, they know to wait before they would go charge. Networking obviously does add to your cost to an extent. The equipment itself will cost more because it has that higher functionality, and then you will have an ongoing expense paying for the networking fees, kind of like having a cell phone plan. Not as expensive, but still a similar concept, because you do have an ongoing service. You then have the question of, is this open to the public? That may be obvious depending on the type of project you have, maybe not. And if it is open to the public, how much do you want to charge? To put that in perspective, electricity costs about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So a pretty normal cost for level 2 charging is somewhere in the realm of 15 to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. That way you're covering your cost of electricity and charging a little bit extra to help cover that ongoing expense. Generally, at least here in Pennsylvania, and at least now, while electric vehicles are a relatively low market share, no one really makes money by going into the level 2 charging business. But it could overall be good for your bottom line. So if that level 2 charging maybe breaks even or maybe even loses a little bit of money, but it draws in additional customers who then spend more money inside of the business, then obviously it can be good for your overall bottom line. And then just think a little bit about your project timeline, as the rebate voucher is valid for 180 days. So you generally want to get it installed and submit for reimbursement within that time frame, but you can reapply if there would be a delay. when you reapply, you are subject to whatever the rebate rules are at that time. So if the rebate level dropped, you would then have the new lower rebate level. But that is the only potential downside of reapplying, so long as the funds are still there, which they should be for at least 18 months to 2 years yet. Okay, so that covers level 2 charging. I know that one can generate a lot of questions. Please, if you have any questions, type them in the chat. I'm just going to cover the rest of the programs that we have, and then we'll go over all of those questions that you've submitted. So next we have the DC fast charging grant program. So this is a competitive grant program. So the level 2 program we just covered, it's a rebate. It's basically you submit a project that is eligible and you get a rebate. The DC fast charging program is competitive. So you submit an application, we score the projects, and we select the highest ones, the ones that score the best based on our criteria. So we do offer about $2 million through this program each year. The picture you see on the right is the first completed station installation through our DC fast charging program. This year, the application should open sometime in the next 1 to 2 months. And then we always have 2 application due dates. So the first application due date will be a couple months after it opens, and then a second one maybe 6 to 7 months after the program opens. And the funding amount gets split between the 2 due dates, about $1 million available for each application due date. There's about 2 years of funding left for this program, so we'll still do this open it up this year, and we'll have another opening next year in 2022. But then that may be it for this program. So DC fast charging equipment has to be available to the public 24/7 to be eligible through this program. We have a maximum award of about $250,000 per project. You must have at least 2 charging units, and each unit must have both the CCS and CHAdeMO plug type. Those plugs are pictured at the bottom. This is a pretty standard setup now that each unit has one of each of those plugs, so any vehicle type is able to charge. To be eligible through the program, it has to have a somewhat higher power output. Previous cycles of this program, you had to have power output of at least 150 kilowatt. And location really comes into play a lot for this program in terms of if your project may be successful and how it scores. For example, being along an interstate can really help, especially if you're along an interstate that does not have other DC fast charging nearby. It can also help to be in an area that has higher electric vehicle adoption, things like that. So there's a lot of criteria that we have listed in the guidelines for what can influence scoring. If getting into DC fast charging is something that you're thinking about, you may really be wondering, is this something that you can make a profit at? Is there a market there? I will say that for now, because this will change over time, for now, DC fast charging is definitely a money loss at this point. There's 2 primary reasons. The first is peak demand electricity charges. So peak demand electricity charges, you may be familiar with as a business. You pay a set amount per month based on the peak flow of electricity through your business. And because of the very intermittent use of DC fast charging, but a high power output when it is in use, it creates a high peak demand use, but there's relatively few charging sessions to spread it out over. So you wind up paying an average of much more than 11 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity that flows through. That will eventually change over time as electric utilities find better ways to charge to DC fast charging stations. I have no idea when that will happen, but it will have to happen over time. And then the second reason is just that there isn't too many people using DC fast charging yet. Many of the people that have electric vehicles charge at home and seldom really have need for the DC fast charging unless they're traveling. That also is certainly changing over time as the number of electric vehicles grows and we start having enough charging infrastructure that people who can't charge at home start to buy these vehicles as well. So those are all things to think about, but like I said, they'll change over time. It's also not necessarily a reason to avoid DC fast charging yet. As we know, most gas stations have gotten used to the concept that you don't really make money off selling the gas, you make money off of everything that happens inside. So, if DC fast charging has the benefit of, people don't spend 3 to 5 minutes filling up their gas tank, they spend a half hour waiting for their vehicle to charge. So anyone going to a DC fast charger is looking for something to do for a half hour. So the potential for them to come inside and spend money is much higher than if they were just filling a gas tank. So there is still a business case to be made here at this point, even if you're losing money on the DC fast charging component. Again, any questions, please type them in the chat and we'll go over them at the end. Okay. So changing gears a little bit from charging to our last driving PA forward program that I'll cover. So this is actually for vehicle replacements. And this can actually be replacing the vehicle with any type of fuel. So it can actually be a diesel to diesel. But this program is designed to help take older diesel vehicles off of the road. As we know that before 2010, the nitrogen oxide emissions from those vehicles were much higher. So any class 4 through 8, so basically medium or heavy duty older diesel vehicles that you have that you're looking to replace, this can be an opportunity to help fund the replacement of it. If you're going diesel to diesel, there's opportunities for that. There's much higher funding incentives if you want to go something like diesel to electric. This program also opens annually. I believe last year it opened late summer to early fall, so it may follow a similar timeline this year. Maybe it'll open midsummer, I'm not quite sure. But essentially it's a rebate program if you're looking to replace 5 or fewer vehicles. So that's a first come, first serve rebate. Just get in the application as soon as you can. And if you're looking to replace 6 or more vehicles, then it's a competitive grant that you would submit an application for and be scored. So on the right here, you can see the pie chart of all the Drive PA Forward programs. That yellow slice, that's our 15% that we're allowed to put towards charging infrastructure. That's what funds the level 2 program and the DC fast charging program. On the right, the orange and the dark blue, those pie slices together are this program that I'm talking about right now, the vehicle replacements. So you can see there's more funding available for those vehicle replacement projects. Yep. Okay, and lastly, we have our one incentive program that is not through Driving PA Forward. So this one is our Alternative Fuels Incentive Grant Program. This helps fund fleet transitions. It is a little bit less restrictive in some ways than the program we just covered through Driving PA Forward because it does not have that scrappage requirement and any vehicle class is eligible. So even your light duty cars are eligible and you don't have to get rid of an old diesel vehicle to help get a new vehicle. The one caveat is the new vehicle you're purchasing has to be an alternative fuel. So propane, CNG, electric, things like that are all eligible through this program. This also opens every year with 2 different application due dates. So it should open probably in June, if not early July. It'll then have 2 application due dates. So there's 3 vehicle types that can be readily available to electric vehicles. One is the incremental cost of purchasing a new electric vehicle, class 1 through 8. If it's class 1, it's just $7,500. So you combine that with the federal tax credit, you can get a new vehicle for a very reasonable price. It can also help with fleet refueling. So if you're transitioning to whatever fuel it is, if it's electric and you put in DC fast charger for your fleet, if it's CNG or propane and you need to put in some infrastructure for that, it can help with those installation costs. And then if you want to put in a public fueling station that's alternative fuel, it can help with that as well. So that could be DC fast charging or again, those other types of alternative fuels. Okay, with that, I have this slide here, which provides just a very basic summary of the different programs that we covered. I then also have a slide I'll put up that has my contact info in a little while. It's after you have a chance to look through this. But we'll now turn it over to any questions we've been getting, and I'll send it to you, Ted.
All right, thank you, Colton. Appreciate the presentation. Just a reminder, I know we had some people that got on a little bit late after the start time. If you have any questions, please use the question feature, and we're going to go through them now and just type them in, and I will moderate them to Colton. Colton, I think you also said you're going to put up your contact information as well, in case you want to contact Colton directly. So, yeah, a couple questions came in. So, level 2 charger, Colton. You know, the rebate, I believe, is up to $4,000 currently. What's the retail cost for that type of charger?
Yeah, so the cost for your project is going to have a number of variables there. So the equipment that you choose to use itself, basically its functionality, will be a factor. The equipment itself can cost as low as less than $1,000 per plug, up to maybe $2,500 per plug, depending on what it's capable of doing, whether it can be networked, things like that. If you network it, you can usually get like a bundle package where you're paying for 3 years of expense up front. So that can add, a couple thousand if you're doing that. And then the installation cost itself will also vary a good bit depending on just your specific building, where you choose to put the equipment in, things like that. So I would say that 80% of the projects that I see, your total cost, all of those things put together, is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 per plug. So our $4,000 per plug is generally covering, a pretty good share of your project cost for those level 2 projects. And there's obviously outliers, some that cost less than that because they use affordable equipment. They have a really good setup. It costs not much to install. Parking garages are usually the top end. They usually go over that $10,000 per plug. But yeah, 80% of the time, you're somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay, and then a similar question for the DC fast charger. I know that's going to be a variable answer, but can you put that in perspective on average total cost?
Yeah, so number one thing to know for DC fast charging is, do you have 3-phase DC power available either at your building or very close to your building? That's something for either an electrician or your electric utility to tell you. As long as the answer to that is yes, which is not always, but most of the time, if you have a business, it's probably not too far away. As long as the answer to that is yes, then to do the projects that we're talking about, so the project where you have a plug that can do 150 kilowatt output, be eligible for that program, you're generally looking at 200 to 250,000 to 200 to 300,000 for installing 2 of those plugs. And our program can cover up to $250,000 or a percentage cap, which percentage cap will be unveiled in the guidelines when that comes out. So again, we're covering a pretty substantial cost, but we are talking a good order of magnitude higher total cost than for level 2. If you put in like a lower end DC fast charge, like 50 kilowatt output, that's not eligible for our program because it's a lower power. It's much more affordable. It's closer to like 50,000 per plugs, maybe 100,000 total for 2 plugs. So that varies a lot depending on your power output, but that gives you a ballpark range.
Okay, thank you. You talked about a couple different incentive-based programs. So you covered one, the second to last, about the diesel-based program. Mm-hmm. Is that strictly for electric, or is that for other alternative fuels such as propane and natural gas?
Yes, so I'll just pull up that slide here. Yeah, so we're talking about this one. So through Driving PA Forward, this one is a little bit different than the others because its goal is reducing NOx emissions. So any project that gets older diesel vehicles off of the road is eligible. So pre-2010 diesel of class 4 through 8, if you're willing to scrap it and replace it with a vehicle of the same vehicle class, it doesn't matter what the new vehicle fuel type is. So you can replace it with diesel, you can replace it with propane, CNG, anything. If you're replacing diesel to diesel, the incentive amount is much lower than if you're replacing it with an alternative fuel, electric being the highest incentive. But yeah, you can pursue these funds as long as you're willing to scrap that older diesel vehicle.
Thank you. Got a question, and I should have asked you this before we started, but are the slides available for distribution that you covered today?
Yes, I can send you a PDF of my slides and you can share them with everyone if you'd like.
Okay, I will. For the individual that asked that, I'll make sure you get it directly. If anyone else wants it, please reach out to me, and I'll make sure you get a copy. Okay, that's the questions we've received so far. I'm going to give it a few more seconds to see if we get anything else in. But Colton, really appreciate your willingness to present here today, and appreciate the information, and thank you for your expertise on the topic.
Sure, certainly. And as we covered, always feel free to reach out with any questions. If you have any questions now or in the future, you're also welcome to do kind of general electric vehicle questions. What's going on at the state policy level. My job is talking about these programs and electric vehicles, so I'll give you any information that I can, anything that you might find helpful. So.
Yeah, well, actually, I have a question. On that note, as it relates to state funding, I think you referenced, the fast charging program is about $2 million a year right now. I think for our membership, the companies that are on the phone, I mean, that's really it's a convenience-based business model, and they're looking at some type of fast charging model. So what do you see? Any insight on 5 years from now, how much that funding is going to increase, or what that looks like?
Yeah, so like that program itself, like that has 2 years left, and that's that program. That's all that will come through it. Now, we've also, really gotten a sense of how to run a DC fast charging program through it. So if we get a new funding source, we could certainly continue it similarly. It would just be coming from the funding would just come from a different place. So there's obviously, discussion at the federal level of having a really large funding plan for expanding charging access. I mean, putting in perspective, the current number they're throwing around is 50 billion. And I think if you combine the diesel settlement funds, you combine private investment commitments that have been made, state government incentive commitments, utilities, all of that put together is less than 10 billion thus far. So like overnight, we'd have like a 5-fold increase in the amount of money committed to DC fast charging. So that would certainly be a really big game changer in terms of how much is available to help with that infrastructure build out. So
makes sense. Okay, Colton, we have not got any more questions, so I really appreciate it. Thank you all for attending this morning, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, take care.
Bye, everyone.